Hello everyone, this is OPS, Olympic Peninsula Spotlight. I'm your host Rick Nichols.
And I'm Matthew Warnick.
We'll be bringing you entertainment from the local area musicians, information concerning local businesses, and we'll also help to keep your calendar up to date with schedules for up-and-coming events. Our program is coming at you from Circle of Sound in Olympia, Washington. This full-service recording studio also offers in-house mastering, CD and DVD duplication, digital transfers, and audio restoration. Circle of Sound, reasonable rates and local convenience.
Today in the studio, we're going to be turning the spotlight on Jason Neimi. As usual, we're going to play 3 good songs and have an interview.
Lately I've been having me some hard times. Is it wrong or is it right? And I think it's gonna be a long time, but I swear I'm gonna get it together when I wake up and see the light. Everything's gonna change. There ain't nothing you can do about it. It's like trying to stop the water when it rains. Don't hold on too tight, don't let go too soon. Time has no memory. A little to the left or way to the right. It all ends in the same way. Lately I've been aiming way too high, 'cause I know you're gonna bring me down when I wake up and see the light. Everything's gonna change. What the hell am I doing with this life? And who have I become? Keep on swimming against the tide. Into the wind I run. Don't hold on too tight, don't let go too soon. Time has no memory. A little to the left or way to the right. It all ends in the same way. Don't hold on too tight, don't let go too soon. Time has no memory. A little to the left or way to the right. It all ends in the same way. I woke up and lost the fight. Now I'm just another drone. Another hand reaching for the sky. My body's sinking like a stone. nothing you can do about it. Time has no memory. Don't hold on too tight. Don't let go too soon. Time has no memory. A little to the left or way to the right. It all ends in the same way. Don't hold on too tight, don't let go too soon. Time has no memory. A little to the left or way to the right. It all ends in the same way.
That was Time Has No Memory. I hope you'll remember these songs, though. Now we're going to play Too Heavy to Hold.
Look around, same old faces, same black place I was before. Kick around, empty spaces, on my way down to the road. My head is weary now, I'll stand too heavy to hold. Look at all pointless racing, shallow grave out in the cold. It's about my only taste. Drag me down another road. My head weary now, I stand too heavy to hold. My head is weary now, I stand too heavy to hold.
Let's welcome to the studio, Jason Neimi. Jason, how are you doing today?
Excellent.
Cool. And do you have any family members you'd like to give a shout out to on our show?
Yeah, I do. Like to give a big shout out to my wife, of course, Noelle, and my son Ty, and of course my mom, who originally got me into this studio, and my father-in-law Ron, and his son Ron Jr. They recorded here, so that's what kind of brought me here. Big thanks to them.
Yes, thank you for another episode of OPS. And earlier we talked, you said your son is into music too? You said he's just getting into music. Do you want to
He is. He's
tell us about that?
Yeah, he's 9 years old. We got him a drum kit early on when he was like 5, and he's just always been into music and dancing, and he started playing cello this year and wanted to play bass, but we kind of talked him out of that because of the size of the instrument. But so he plays cello, and he also plays some piano, and he likes to bang around on the drum kit and my keyboard, and recently he's picked up a little guitar too, so that's been really exciting and fun to watch.
Right on. Do you think he'll be the next rock star someday?
I don't know about that, but I've been trying to encourage him to start a little kid band, something like a neighborhood band or something along those lines. I'll see where that goes.
And you can slap it on YouTube, and maybe he'll be the next famous musician.
Maybe so.
So describe your music to our audience so they can tell us your take on it.
Okay. Well, it tends to be all over the map at times, but recently I've been trying to focus more on really just getting down to writing songs and completing songs and dialing into what songs really mean to people. So my recent developments in music, I tend to think of them as more song-centric, probably gravitating more into the rock and roll. Rock and roll definitely is a huge influence, so that's a big part of it. Some of it comes from a country background, or primarily sort of outlaw country. I'm not a big country fan, but I do like bluegrass. I like a little bit of country. I like how some of that music moves and drives. And then I'm also into technology, and I'm fascinated by technology and how it integrates into music. So I do a lot of experimenting at home with my keyboard and with GarageBand and other programs. And I don't do a lot on my computer with music, but I'm just interested in all the different things that can be done with technology. So my music tends to be a combination of a lot of acoustic music and kind of coming from a place of high energy and rock and roll, and then also settling into kind of more easy paced stuff with some of the songs that I write, where I try to keep it really, really centric, and it's based a lot on emotion. I'm always trying to conjure up emotion and feeling, and trying to get a reaction out of people, and hopefully relate to them on an emotional level.
Yeah, I've said in the past that that's what makes a good song, is that it has a soul behind it, which is really just emotion. That's cool. You mentioned that exact same thing. Is there anything specific you like to, a specific subject you like to write about?
I don't know that there's a specific subject. I tend to draw a lot of my lyrical inspiration just from what I see, around the world, what I see around my friends and family. I think a lot of my writing tends to come across as maybe that it's from me or about me. A lot of times I use the word I in my songs, but it's not always, in fact, most of the time, it's not really about me, but I just sort of try to put myself in the place of people that I see and situations and, just what's happening in the world. My life's been interesting at times and dull at other times, and I've been around people that have abused themselves, and I've seen people rise and fall and do strange things, and not to mention everything that's going on in the world, what you see on TV, what you see out on the streets, and just everywhere. So I try to take all that and just put it into something that hopefully will identify with somebody somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm sure the world gives you plenty of material.
Exactly, yeah.
So what got you into music?
So I didn't really play music until probably about the time I graduated from high school. But I always listened to a lot of it. mean, the direct answer to your question would be probably my mother. She was kind of a folky guitar player. She had a 12-string and 6 strings around the house. And, some of my earliest memories were trying to get her attention when she was playing her guitar. And I would have just been probably a toddler at the time and not really understanding why she wouldn't just stop playing and, attend to me. And, those are real vague and, fuzzy memories, but those are some of my early kind of musical memories. Music always seemed to be around the house. So I did a lot of listening to music, in record form for a long time, and 8-track cassettes, tapes, and then onto CDs. So I was primarily an athlete, in my early days, in my childhood and, my teenage years. And music was a part of my life, but I never really aspired to write it or play an instrument. I guess with one exception, sometime around 5th grade, I wanted a saxophone. And I didn't. We lived in an apartment, and, I can understand why my mom didn't get me a saxophone now. But that was my first memory of really wanting to even play an instrument. And so music was just a tool for me to just sort of have fun with and listen. And, I used it a lot when I would exercise. But what really happened with me was sometime late in my teenage years, I started, being around other musicians, people at school and people that I would meet. And I don't really know why or how it happened, but I remember something just sort of clicking, and I remember thinking, wow, I want to write songs. It really wasn't, for me, it wasn't that I wanted to pick up the guitar and shred or anything like that. It was just that I just wanted to write music for some reason. And there was always a guitar in the house, so I just started plucking around, and my mom showed me a couple chords, and then I just got right at it. Right out of high school, I was going through this awkward transition in my life, and it was just a really good time for me to dive into a musical instrument, and that's what I did. And I put a lot into it, and I still do. I don't know that my passion is really, diminished in any sense. I really just love to play music, and I love to play my guitar, and I'm always trying to do something different and learn more. But I came to it from a place of wanting to write music, and not less as a performer and more of a writer.
So give us a little bit of history about what you've done as a musician. Have you been in any bands or played in any big shows?
Boy, I'd sure like to say I've played some big shows, but unfortunately the answer is no. I've dabbled a lot. I've been in and out of several bands. I moved around a lot, so I would describe my musical development in kind of terms of these fits and starts is kind of what has happened to me. I moved around a lot, so my teenage years I spent east of the mountains in Spokane, and I started playing there, and that's where I just barely started picking up the guitar, learning the very basics. And then shortly after that happened, I moved here to Olympia and just kept playing. And after a couple years of being here, I ended up answering an ad that I saw at a convenience store out in the South Bay area, and I met this drummer and bass player, and went out to their house. And at the time I was a rock and roller. Grunge was a big thing, and that was a big influence on my life. And so I was learning all my favorites, all the current, grunge material, plus, all the classic rock stuff that I loved, and sort of everything in between.
I grew up on a lot of that too. So
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it was a big, powerful thing at the time.
I told Rick, your first 2 songs sounded to me like almost like a perfect blend of Everlast and Alice in Chains. Like if you combine that sound into one.
Yeah.
I kind of had that going on, which I think is cool. I like that.
Cool. So, that led me to playing with a couple guys, to actually legitimately playing with a drummer and a bass player. And I had a lot of fun playing with these guys for a lot of years. I bought this little 4-track cassette, and we would record these little demos in the basement of this house I was living at. In fact, one of them is up on my profile, called Acoustic Wah, and it's really just this instrumental tune, but the actual recording is a 4-track recording of us, back in probably 1997 in this tiny little place. And then what happened was, I played with these guys for quite a while, and then I ended up moving down to the Vancouver area. So again, it was another move, kind of removed me from something that I was into. I should back up. We ended up finding a vocalist, and we started playing with a guy here in a band. So then we had a complete band with vocals and drum, bass, guitar. But it was a real short-lived thing. We did a little bit of recording, wrote a few songs, never really went anywhere, and then it sort of dissolved like an early band, like you might imagine an early band would, when nobody really knows what they're doing, what they want, or anything like that. Then I ended up in Vancouver, continued to write, continued to practice, and that's where I kind of really got my feet wet with performing. And I'd go hit a bunch of open mics, and I spent a couple years just doing that. I'd play in these little community events and at parties for people, and things like that. And then my drummer and bass player that I played with up here, we started playing again, and they would travel down, and we'd play in my house, and we were finally starting to put together some songs, doing more recording on our little 4-track, and having a blast. And we were just at the point where we were ready to go out and start sharing it with people, playing. And then the bass player ended up, the brewery shut down. He worked up here at the brewery. The brewery shut down, and he lost his job and ended up moving to Cincinnati or somewhere in that area. And so then, that sort of put the skids on that project. And so not too long after that, I moved back up here and looked up the drummer and met some people, and ended up playing in another band. And, we actually finally gave ourselves a name, and this was a project that went on for about 4, maybe 5 years, and the name of the band was Stonefly. And played with a good friend of mine named Noah Kirkland, and our old drummer. And then it took us forever to find a bass player, and we finally found a bass player. And after about 3 years of just kind of hitting it hard, when we could, we finally had a set of songs, and we went in and we recorded at a studio, and we recorded 4 tracks. And one of those songs off that first original recording, the very first song that I ever really wrote, that I actually enjoyed and was somewhat proud of, ended up on a compilation disc put out by the Hive recording studio up in the SeaTac area. And it's called Cool Mountain Lake, and it's up on the profile.
Cool.
And so then what happened with that band was our drummer ultimately kind of decided he didn't want to be as active as we wanted to be. He didn't want to lug his equipment around and play the number of shows we wanted to play. And we went on to play, we were just getting started to book shows and play shows, and he kind of dropped off the map. And so we regrouped as quick as we could. We found another drummer, and kept the name, went back into the studio, recorded 4 more tracks, which I'm not sure I put those up online anywhere, maybe a couple, but actually Too Heavy to Hold might be part of that. I get the 2 sessions confused. But that didn't work out. We had a difficult time adjusting to that drummer, and ultimately the whole thing kind of dissolved. And then I just quit for a while. I got really frustrated, and
I could see how that would be kind of a demeaning experience or something.
It really was, yeah. And I just kind of stopped, and I spent a good year and a half where I almost didn't do anything musically. I just focused on being with family and kind of repairing some, frail relationships, and then my friend Noah calls up and he says, "Hey, I got a couple guys that you might be interested in playing with," and so he kind of connected me to the guys that I play with now in my current band, Marshall Road, and we've been at that now for a couple years, playing lots of cover songs. We have a list now of, we do about 30, 40 cover songs, and we're working on some original material, and we've been playing some shows around town and hope to play more. And so that's sort of the short, or maybe not so short, history of kind of my musical development and my current state of where I'm at. And right now I'm really wanting to really focus on my original material. We do a lot of cover songs in my band, and I love that, but I'm really passionate about my original music and just want to get it off the ground.
Yeah, that's a very common story that we get through here. People who on our show who can somewhat claim to be famous have that similar story. It's just kind of hard to get a band together, hard to get noticed, and hard to get your music, let's say, on the radio or anything like that.
Getting a band together a lot of times is easy. It's keeping it together that's so difficult.
That's the truth.
Bingo.
You can definitely find people, let's make a band, but as you experience with your drummer, getting them to commit is the difficulty.
Or to conform.
Yeah,
Or to carry
there's
their own
so
luggage.
much at play. I mean, you get paid squat when you're starting, and it's a lot of work just lugging your gear around and dealing with all the crap you have to deal with. That it's easy for me to understand why people just finally throw their hands up and say, "No way, this isn't for me."
Yeah.
But I'm not one of them. I love it.
Right on. So are there any famous musicians that you draw influence from? Any artists that you really like and one day was like, man, I just want to do that style of music?
Yes and no. I mean, there's many styles that I'm interested in. I've gone through various phases of, I guess, where I idolized certain people. I was real into country music when I was younger in my teenage years, but it was the country music of those times and a time earlier, and it was the outlaw stuff. It was Hank Williams Jr. and Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings and Chris Christopherson, that kind of stuff.
Very different than what you hear on the radio
Very much so.
nowadays.
And I always kind of liked bluegrass and some folk music of the time, but I was also real into what was going on at the time. So for me, that would have been in the mid '80s, mid to late '80s. So during those days, the country music thing, I'm not sure that I would look to any specific. I guess I can draw a couple. Hank Williams Jr., I really spent a lot of time just something, just for me, I just liked his writing. I liked his style, at the time. But again, that's when grunge hit, like that. For me, anyway.
It'd be hard not to be influenced.
Yeah,
by
as
grunge.
a teenager and
growing up at that time.
God, and so, I ended up moving from Shelton at the time, is where I lived, Shelton, Washington, and I moved over to Spokane when I was a sophomore in high school, and that was a really tough transition for me, and that was right at the time when this whole music scene thing was changing, and so I sort of latched onto that, and so some of those big early bands, the Pearl Jams and the Nirvanas and Soundgarden and Mudhoney and Screaming Trees and everything, Alice in Chains, everything that was going on there. Stone Temple Pilots was another one, and that's sort of where I started developing my chops really as a guitar player and really diving into rock music, whereas before I was just kind of strumming around and learning some folk songs. And but the funny thing for me is at the same time, exact same time in my life, I was also spinning these old records that my mom had around the house. Grateful Dead was a big thing for me. The Doors was a huge thing for me.
I like the Doors a lot too.
Yeah,
They're a really good band.
Steve Miller was a big deal for me for a long time. And I would listen to these old records, and the Dead Skeletons in the Closet was one that I would just play all the time. And so that's, those were, some of my early influences. And I moved away from the country influences. And then later on, and this was probably now moving into some of the more areas of my, musicianship in terms of my guitar playing, where my cousin turned me on to Fish, the band Fish. And I remember I didn't get it at first, and I really wasn't into it, but then I ended up playing with another guy that was really into Fish, and so I was hearing it all the time. And then I really started getting into Trey Anastasio's guitar playing. And then that led me, then I started diving into, well, what does he listen to? And, that led me to the Allman Brothers, which became a huge, huge thing for me. I was obsessed with Duane Allman for a period of time, and spent a solid 2 or 3 years trying to really develop my slide chops, which I never play slide anymore, but I really worked hard at it for a long time. And so I love the Allman Brothers, love the Dead, and those things kind of fit together. And then I started understanding Fish and the jam band scene, and got into learning about other bands like the String Cheese Incident, and went to some of their shows and just had a great time with some friends there, and that became a huge influence for me for many, many years. And then in sort of a weird way, I became somehow that drew me to John Coltrane and bebop music and jazz and Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and some of that stuff, and then I took a significant shift in my playing at that time, and I started trying to learn this music of John Coltrane, and I'd buy all these books and I'd study the charts and try to learn the phrases. And that music doesn't really necessarily have a place in a lot of what I do, but it kind of illustrates some of how I've developed as a musician. Those things have been a big part of my playing and my style and what I aspire to be, as a musician. And then I went through this thing where I just put it away. I just said, this is too powerful of an influence on me. I got to find a way to try to develop my own voice. And I stopped listening to a lot of the jazz and jam band stuff that I really liked, and just started getting at my own stuff and diving into my own stuff.
Yeah, right on. That's how you develop as your own artist. But I always ask that because we're all influenced by somebody. Art is collaborative. Nobody can claim to just say, hey, I just invented this new style out of thin air. So what is your ultimate goal as a musician?
Well, the ultimate goal, I guess, is the same as so many other aspiring musicians. My goal is to find some way to make it a profession, in some shape or form. And for me, it doesn't have to be a performer, but I love to perform. It could be a writer, it could be a performer, it could be just being involved somehow in the industry.
A groupie?
Maybe not a groupie. I might draw the line there, but but I just like being around it. I like music. I like being around musicians, and I like the equipment, and so the ultimate goal is to find a way to actually make it work financially, and spend the remaining years of my life just being around it. I don't ever intend to stop playing music. I can't ever imagine it. So it's the sort of thing that I plan to do till I croak.
Right on. Is there any advice you'd like to give out to any aspiring musicians or people who hear our show and aren't in the same boat as you are?
Well, I'm not really in too much of a position to give anybody useful advice, but I guess
as a opinion is always a good
one. There's so much, as a player, learning to play an instrument, just have fun with it. Have fun with it, learn as much as you can, learn the stuff that you like. Learn where it's coming from, though. I mean, I guess that would probably be one of the big things that I would say is, if you latch on to somebody that is a big influence on you as a player or writer, learn what influenced them, because it all, it's all this, like you mentioned, it's all just this chain of influences.
Yeah.
And
So there's the Indian philosophy. They don't worry about plagiarism because they say everything is influenced and no idea is your own. Everything's collaborative.
yeah,
So they don't have like plagiarism rules because they believe that as a philosophy.
huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've always said that that's the biggest form of flattery
Yeah.
is copying.
Imitation.
Yep, imitation. So, yeah, as you learn your instrument, just have a good time with it, but take it seriously. If you're interested in learning, it's the kind of thing that you have to stick with, and you have to put the time into it, and you have to think of it like an exercise, like you do anything else. If if you want to be strong or fast, you got to spend time, running and lifting weights and exercising. It's the same with music. In terms of writing, writing's writing music and writing lyrics, that's all kind of a creative process sort of thing, and comes from various places, but it also has to be developed. I mean, you have to spend time, rewriting and sharing. I think that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that I've made in my development is I probably should have shared a lot more of my stuff with people and asked for more feedback, and taken some of that and used it to keep crafting. But
Yeah.
I guess the cliche, just don't give up. If you really want to do it, just keep at it, keep honing the craft and do what you love.
Definitely. So where can people hear your music? Where can our viewers?
Probably the
Listen
most developed place that I have is this Reverb Nation profile that I developed under the name Experimental, sort of a wordplay, and that's a place that I go. I don't put all my stuff up there, but I put new stuff up that I'm working on. Some of it's been recorded on my my phone. Some of it's recorded on old 4-tracks. Some of it's recorded directly on my computer. The recent post, was recorded right here in this studio. And it's so it's Reverb Nation under the name Experimental. And then I've had stuff on YouTube. Our band has a YouTube channel, and we have a lot of our videos up there. And we also have a Reverb Nation profile under my band name Marshall Road, and we have some of our stuff there. I'm working on getting stuff on Sonic Bids and SoundCloud, and that's really kind of where I'm at right now. Is I'm just trying to figure this whole online world out and how all these sites relate to each other, and where you can post stuff and where it's going to be viewed and how to share it. And but probably the best one is Reverb Nation.
Right. And how can they contact you?
Most of my information is posted on those profiles. Email is probably the best way. I have a phone number that I believe is posted on there, and but email is great.
Yeah.
That's kind of, at least from an online perspective, that's generally how I prefer to be contacted, without putting my phone number out to the world.
Yeah. Okay. And are there any final thoughts before we head out?
Final thoughts. I guess my final thoughts is I'm excited for this interview. This is great. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm hoping that people will sort of follow me and come out to shows and be a part of it, support me through their actions, and if I post stuff, buy it if it's for sale, download it if it's there, share it with people, and just kind of help me get this thing off the ground.
Excellent. And me and Rick hope the same thing. Thank you for being in the studio. That was an interview with Jason Neimi, and we're going to leave you with his experimental jam session, Dramatica.
All right.
And that music normally means it's calendar of events, but we're not going to do those anymore. We've got a new segment planned, so keep an ear out in the future. We have a real treat in store for you.
This is Rick Nichols
And Matthew Warnick.
with OPS, wishing all of you a great week.
We'd love to hear from you, so contact us at olympicpeninsulaspotlight@gmail.com.